We're about to dive into a 10-minute horror speedrun, jumping from one Roblox nightmare to the next. And the goal is simple. See how many games can actually scare us in under a minute. Sounds easy? Trust me, it's not. Some of these games will be terrifying, while others might just be a weird mess of bad jump scares and broken mechanics. But that's part of the fun. Game 1. Doors, the fastest heart attack simulator. Right, so I jumped into Doors thinking I had at least a few seconds to get my bearings. Nope. The game throws you straight into a dimly lit hallway, giving off serious haunted hotel vibes. Fancy, but eerie. I hesitated for a second, then pushed through the first door. Nothing. Second door? Still nothing. Maybe this wasn't as scary as people made it seem. Then the lights flickered, and let me tell you, pure panic mode. I had no idea what was happening, but instinct kicked in, and I sprinted into a closet. Some shadowy nightmare named Rush blasted through the hallway at full speed, making the entire screen shake. Somehow, I actually survived. But before I could celebrate, my screen went dark and a message popped up. You died to hide. Turns out, you can't stay in the closet for too long because another entity kicks you out and kills you anyway. So basically, this game forces you to think fast or die trying. The tension builds ridiculously fast, and even though I barely scratched the surface in 60 seconds, I was already sweating. My verdict is a solid 9 out of 10 on the panic meter. If you love horror that keeps you on edge, this is it. Game 2. The Mimic, Nightmare Fuel in under a minute. If Doors was intense, then the Mimic was pure nightmare fuel. The second I spawned in, I knew I was in trouble. The game drops you into this eerie, dark Japanese village, and the atmosphere alone was enough to make me uneasy. The music was subtly creepy, and the lighting was just dim enough to make you feel like something was always lurking. So naturally, I did what any horror game protagonist would do. I grabbed a flashlight and walked straight into danger. About 10 steps in, I found a house. And because I clearly don't value my survival instincts, I walked inside. Biggest mistake ever. The second I stepped in, this tall, lanky, terrifying entity came out of nowhere and bolted straight at me. I ran in the opposite direction, sprinting into what I thought was an exit, but it turned out to be just a maze. And if there's one thing you never want to do in a horror game, it's get lost in a maze. I had about 5 seconds of frantic, blind running before my screen exploded with the loudest jump scare imaginable. I don't even know what got me. I just know I nearly threw my headphones off. Even in less than a minute, this game delivered one of the scariest experiences I've had on Roblox. The verdict is 10 out of 10 on the scare scale. If you want a game that doesn't hold back, this is it. Game 3. Apeirophobia. The backrooms in Roblox? Alright, so this one didn't hit me with an instant jump scare, but that almost made it worse. Apeirophobia throws you into what looks like an empty, yellow-tinted office space. You know, classic backrooms territory. No music, no obvious threats, just the low hum of flickering fluorescent lights and the unsettling feeling that I was definitely not alone. At first, nothing happened. I wandered around, half expecting something to pop out at any second, but it didn't. That should have been a relief, but instead, it made everything worse. The longer I walked, the more I started second-guessing every shadow, every flicker of movement. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. It wasn't running, it wasn't charging at me. It was just there, watching. So I did the only logical thing. I turned and ran in the opposite direction without even processing what I saw. That's when the buzzing noise got loud. And suddenly, something was chasing me. I couldn't even tell what it was. Humanoid, maybe? All I knew was that it was fast, and my only instinct was to keep running. I didn't last long, but honestly, I didn't need to. Even in under a minute, the sheer unease of this game stuck with me. So the verdict would be 8 out of 10 for pure dread. It's not about the jump scares, it's about the fear of what you can't see. Game 4. The Intruder. A horror game that watches you back. This one messed with my head. The Intruder starts off in a small, dark room, and right away, I knew I was in for something unsettling. The only things in the room was a set of old-school security monitors and a ringing phone. And if horror games have taught me anything, it's that when a phone rings, you probably shouldn't answer it. But, of course, I did. As soon as I picked up, the lights started flickering. I switched on the monitors, and there it was. Some disturbingly realistic humanoid figure just standing in the middle of a hallway on one of the cameras. It wasn't moving. It was just staring. At me? At nothing? No idea. But I didn't have time to figure it out because the screen glitched and suddenly knocking at the door. Now, a smart person would stay put. A smart person would not open the door. But for some reason, my brain went, maybe it's fine. Spoiler, it was not fine. The second I opened that door, the screen went black, and I got jump scared so hard I nearly threw my mouse. Even though I barely made it past the tutorial, this game is straight up psychological horror at its finest. The verdict is a solid 9 out of 10. The game feels like a mix of Five Nights at Freddy's and Paranormal Activity, and I was not prepared. Game 5, 3008, IKEA. But make it terrifying. I went into this game expecting horror, but what I got was a never-ending IKEA nightmare. At first, it didn't even feel like a scary game. Just rows and rows of familiar blue shelves, furniture displays, and that weird feeling you get when you realize you've been in an IKEA for way too long. I wandered around, half expecting a jump scare, but it never came. So I figured, okay, maybe this isn't that bad. Then nightfall hit, and everything immediately went downhill. Out of nowhere, the friendly-looking IKEA employees turned into monstrous creatures and started sprinting at me, screaming something about store hours being over. My first instinct, run. My second, try to build a fort with whatever furniture I could find. But guess what? Stacking couches in a panic is harder than it looks. I managed to get a couple of shelves up before one of them jumped over my makeshift wall and absolutely destroyed me. It wasn't scary in the traditional jump scare way, but there was something so unsettling about the whole experience. The endless empty store, the eerie quiet before chaos, the fact that I was running for my life from a store employee. So the verdict would be 7 out of 10 for weirdness. Definitely more of a survival game than horror, but it gets creepier the longer you stay. Final results. Can Roblox horror games be terrifying in 10 minutes? So, after speedrunning 5 horror games in just 10 minutes, the big question is, did any of them actually scare me? Short answer, yes, absolutely. But some hit harder than others. The Mimic takes the crown for the biggest scare. It wasted no time in throwing me into a nightmare. And that jump scare, I'm still recovering from it. Apeirophobia wins for most tense atmosphere. It wasn't immediate terror, but the slow burn horror and feeling of being watched was chilling. 3008 was without a doubt the most fun chaos. It wasn't terrifying in a traditional way, but running for my life from IKEA employees screaming about store hours is definitely unforgettable. Then there's The Intruder, which surprised me the most. In under a minute, it managed to be one of the creepiest psychological horror experiences, making me paranoid from the moment I saw that figure on the security camera. And finally, Doors takes the title for most intense. The pacing, the panic, and that feeling of never knowing what's behind the next door make it the perfect horror game for adrenaline junkies. So, can Roblox horror games actually be terrifying in such a short time? Absolutely. But some definitely need a little more playtime to really hit their full scare potential. Either way, I might need a break from horror for a while, or maybe just one more round. Either way, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments down below.